In the year 843 CE, during the height of the High Middle Ages, a pivotal moment reshaped the political landscape of Western Europe. The vast Carolingian Empire, stretching across much of Western and Central Europe, stood at a crucial crossroads following the death of Louis the Pious in 840. The political geography of this era centered around the Frankish kingdom, a massive territory that encompassed modern-day France, Germany, northern Italy, and the Low Countries. This vast empire represented the culmination of Charlemagne's conquests and his vision of a restored Roman Empire in the West. The realm was influenced by various powers, with the Byzantine Empire exerting cultural and political pressure from the east and Norse raiders threatening from the north. The death of Louis the Pious in 840 plunged the empire into a succession crisis. This period of intense political turmoil would ultimately lead to the Treaty of Verdun, fundamentally altering the makeup of medieval Europe. The empire's territories were contested between Louis's three sons, each commanding significant resources and loyal followers. The physical landscape of the Carolingian Empire was dominated by impressive architectural features. Mighty Carolingian fortifications and castles stood as symbols of power and authority, their stone walls rising above the medieval countryside. These structures served both defensive and administrative purposes, housing noble courts and providing protection during times of conflict. Monasteries played a crucial role in this period, functioning as centers of learning, culture, and spiritual authority. These religious institutions preserved ancient knowledge through their scriptoria, where monks meticulously copied manuscripts, maintaining the intellectual heritage of the classical world. The daily rhythm of monastic life was marked by church bells, which rang out the canonical hours, structuring both religious observances and secular activities. The empire was connected by an extensive network of roads, many inherited from the Roman period. These vital arteries facilitated trade, with merchant caravans regularly traversing the realm, carrying goods and news between different regions. The maintenance of these roads was essential for both commerce and military movements during the succession crisis. The material culture of the period reflected the empire's wealth and sophistication. The nobility dressed in elaborate clothing, wearing tunics embroidered with gold thread and fur-lined cloaks, demonstrating their status and power. Their attire combined traditional Frankish elements with Roman influences, reflecting the cultural synthesis that characterized the Carolingian period. The architectural style of the era represented a fascinating transition between late Roman and early Romanesque designs. Churches and palaces exhibited this blend, with Roman-style arches and columns appearing alongside newer architectural innovations. These buildings served as powerful statements of authority and cultural continuity with the Roman past. This was a world in transition, where the dream of a unified Christian empire competed with emerging regional identities. The Treaty of Verdun would emerge from this context, marking the end of Charlemagne's united empire and the beginning of a new political order in Western Europe. The agreement would lay the groundwork for the eventual emergence of distinct national identities that would shape European history for centuries to come. If you are passionate about the Middle Ages and want to embark on this historical journey with us, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel so you don't miss any fascinating content. Lothair emerged as the central figure in the succession crisis as Charlemagne's eldest grandson and the designated heir to the imperial title. Born in 795, he was crowned co-emperor by his father, Louis the Pious, in 817. As the firstborn, Lothair believed firmly in his right to maintain the unity of the empire under his supreme authority. His ambition and determination to preserve imperial unity would ultimately lead to conflict with his brothers. Louis the German, despite being younger, proved himself a formidable leader in the Eastern territories. Born around 810, he developed strong connections with the Germanic peoples east of the Rhine, earning their loyalty through his understanding of their customs and effective governance. His political acumen was evident in his ability to build and maintain alliances, particularly in his strategic partnership with his younger brother Charles against Lothair. Charles the Bald, the youngest of the three brothers, born in 823, demonstrated remarkable political skill despite his youth. Raised to rule the Western territories, he showed early signs of diplomatic prowess and military capability. His mother, Judith of Bavaria, had carefully cultivated support for him among the Western nobility, providing him with a strong power base during the succession crisis. Walla of Corbie, a significant political advisor and former count, played a crucial role in shaping the political landscape of this period. As the abbot of Corbie, he wielded considerable influence through his connections to both the religious and secular spheres of power. His counsel was sought by all parties involved in the conflict, though his relationships with the various factions were complex and sometimes contradictory. The Frankish nobility played a pivotal role in the succession crisis, with their shifting allegiances significantly impacting the balance of power. These nobles, including counts, dukes, and margraves, controlled substantial territories and military resources. Their support was crucial for each brother's claim to power, and they often leveraged their positions to secure greater autonomy and privileges. The clergy, particularly high-ranking bishops and abbots, served as essential mediators during the conflict. Their religious authority and educational background made them ideal negotiators, while their extensive network of monasteries provided crucial infrastructure for communication and diplomacy. Many of these religious leaders had been educated in the palace school established by Charlemagne and maintained strong connections to the royal family. Merchants and traders found themselves in a precarious position during the Civil War. Their livelihood depended on stable trade routes and peaceful conditions for commerce. Many had built extensive networks throughout the empire, and the prospect of its division threatened their established business relationships. Their concerns about maintaining trade routes and commercial privileges influenced local support for various claimants. The peasant population, though often overlooked in historical accounts, bore the brunt of the civil conflict. As armies moved across the landscape, agricultural communities suffered from requisitioning of supplies and occasional pillaging. Their fears of prolonged warfare and instability were well-founded, as many had experienced the devastating effects of previous conflicts. Among the influential figures who shaped events were various counts and margraves who controlled strategic regions along the empire's frontiers. These border lords often maintained semi-independent positions and could significantly influence the outcome of conflicts through their control of key fortifications and military resources. The Byzantine Empire's representatives and papal legates also played subtle but important roles in the negotiations. Their influence reflected the international dimension of the succession crisis, as both the Eastern Roman Empire and the papacy had vested interests in the future of the Carolingian realm. This complex web of characters and their interactions ultimately shaped the outcome of the Treaty of Verdun, leading to the division of Charlemagne's empire and the emergence of new political entities that would evolve into modern European nations. The Treaty of Verdun represents one of the most significant turning points in medieval European history, marking the transition from a unified empire to a fragmented political landscape. This fundamental shift challenged the very concept of universal Christian rule that Charlemagne had established and would shape European politics for centuries to come. The central tension lay in the conflict between two competing visions, maintaining a unified imperial authority versus acknowledging the growing reality of regional autonomy. This struggle reflected deeper cultural and administrative challenges that had been building throughout the Carolingian period. The concept of imperial unity was deeply rooted in both Roman tradition and Christian theology. Charlemagne's empire had been built on the idea of a restored Roman Empire in the West, sanctified by the Church and unified under a single ruler. This ideal represented more than just political unity. It embodied the notion of a universal Christian realm, a direct successor to Rome's legacy. However, practical realities increasingly challenged this idealistic vision. The vast size of the empire, combined with diverse linguistic and cultural traditions, made centralized administration increasingly difficult. Regional identities and interests began to assert themselves more strongly, particularly in areas with distinct cultural traditions like the Germanic East and the Romanized West. The death of Louis the Pious in 840 triggered a full-scale civil war among his three sons. This conflict was not merely a family quarrel, but a fundamental struggle over the nature and future of the empire itself. The war revealed deep divisions within the Frankish nobility and highlighted the growing importance of regional loyalties. The civil war unfolded in several phases. Initial confrontation. Lothair immediately claimed supreme authority over the entire empire, prompting resistance from his brothers. Military campaigns. A series of maneuvers and skirmishes as each brother sought to secure their power base and attract noble support. Diplomatic initiatives. Attempts at negotiation interspersed with military actions, showing the complex nature of medieval political conflict. The Battle of Fontenoy-en-Puisaye, fought on June 25, 841, stands as one of the bloodiest and most decisive engagements of the Civil War. This battle pitted Lothair and his ally Pepin II of Aquitaine against the combined forces of Charles the Bald and Louis the German. The battle resulted in massive casualties among the Frankish nobility, with contemporary chronicles describing it as a catastrophe for the Frankish military elite. The defeat of Lothair's forces proved crucial in shifting the balance of power and demonstrating the impossibility of maintaining a unified empire by force. The Strasbourg Oaths, sworn in February 842, marked a crucial diplomatic turning point. Charles and Louis publicly pledged mutual support against Lothair, each speaking in the language of the other's troops, Proto-French and Proto-German, to demonstrate their commitment to cooperation. These oaths are particularly significant for linguistic history, as they provide one of the earliest written examples of both Old French and Old High German, highlighting the growing linguistic division within the empire. The negotiations at Verdun represented the culmination of these conflicts and the recognition that the empire could no longer be maintained as a single entity. The key aspects of the negotiations included territorial division, careful consideration of how to divide the empire while maintaining relatively equal shares of wealth and resources, rights and responsibilities, establishing the relationships between the three kingdoms and defining the nature of imperial authority, practical arrangements, addressing issues such as shared responsibilities for defense, trade routes, and ecclesiastical properties. The Treaty of Verdun's impact extended far beyond its immediate context. Political evolution. The treaty laid the groundwork for the eventual emergence of France and Germany as distinct political entities. Cultural development. The division accelerated the development of distinct cultural and linguistic traditions in different regions. Administrative changes. New systems of governance evolved to meet the needs of smaller, more focused kingdoms. Economic implications. Trade patterns and economic relationships adapted to the new political boundaries. The treaty thus marked not just the end of Charlemagne's unified empire, but the beginning of a new phase in European history, characterized by regional powers and emerging national identities. During the mid-9th century, as the Carolingian Empire approached its division, daily life and social structures reflected a complex web of relationships, obligations, and emerging feudal practices. Let us explore the intricate social fabric of this transformative period. The developing feudal system profoundly shaped everyday life. Noble lords resided in fortified manors, overseeing vast estates worked by peasant farmers. These estates operated as self-sufficient economic units, with peasants cultivating the land in exchange for protection and the right to farm small plots for their own subsistence. The relationship between lords and peasants was carefully regulated through customary laws and obligations. Personal loyalty and oaths formed the backbone of medieval society. Warriors pledged their allegiance to lords through elaborate ceremonies, kneeling before their superiors and placing their hands between those of their lord. These sacred bonds created intricate networks of obligation and mutual support, essential for maintaining social order during this turbulent period. The practice of commendation, where free men placed themselves under the protection of powerful nobles, became increasingly common. The church wielded enormous influence as a mediator of conflicts. Bishops and abbots often served as arbitrators in disputes between nobles, using their spiritual authority and educated background to forge compromises. Monastery grounds frequently served as neutral meeting places where conflicting parties could negotiate under the protection of sacred peace. The church's role extended beyond spiritual matters into practical governance and diplomacy. Monastic life represented a parallel society within medieval culture. Monasteries functioned as centers of learning, where monks maintained daily routines of prayer, study, and manual labor. The scriptoria, where manuscripts were copied and preserved, safeguarded ancient knowledge through the tumultuous period of imperial division. These religious communities also provided essential services to the surrounding population, including medical care and education. Life in the monasteries followed the strict schedule of the divine office, with prayers marking the hours from dawn to dusk. Monks engaged in various activities, from cultivating medicinal herbs in monastery gardens to producing illuminated manuscripts. The monastery's bell tower regulated not only religious observances, but also the rhythm of work and rest for the entire community. The peasant population bore the heaviest burden during times of political upheaval. Their daily lives centered around agricultural labor, working from sunrise to sunset in the fields. The succession crisis and subsequent civil war disrupted agricultural production as armies moved across the countryside, requisitioning food and supplies. Poor harvests during this period led to localized famines, highlighting the vulnerability of rural communities to political instability. Women played crucial roles in maintaining social stability during this period. Noble women managed estates during their husband's absence, while peasant women combined agricultural work with domestic duties. In monasteries, nuns preserved learning and provided educational opportunities for noble daughters. The period saw several powerful abbesses wielding significant influence in both religious and secular affairs. Trade and crafts continued despite political turmoil. Local markets brought together peasants and craftsmen, while traveling merchants maintained longer-distance trade routes. Towns, though still relatively small, served as centers for specialized craft production and commerce. The division of the empire would eventually lead to new patterns of trade and economic exchange. In the evening hours, communities gathered for storytelling and music, maintaining cultural traditions that blended Christian teachings with local folklore. These gatherings strengthened social bonds and provided entertainment while preserving oral histories and customs. The material culture reflected social hierarchies. Nobles dressed in fine imported fabrics and displayed their status through jewelry and weapons, while peasants wore simple homespun clothing. The quality of housing, from stone castles to wooden peasant dwellings, marked clear social distinctions. This period witnessed the gradual transformation of social structures that would define medieval Europe for centuries to come. The Treaty of Verdun not only divided territories, but also set in motion changes that would affect every level of society, from the highest nobles to the humblest peasants. What do you think would have happened if the empire had remained united? Leave your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel. The path to the Treaty of Verdun was marked by dramatic events and political upheavals that fundamentally transformed the Carolingian Empire. Let us explore these pivotal moments in detail. The death of Louis the Pious in 840 marked the beginning of the succession crisis. While hunting near his palace in Ingelheim, Louis fell ill and died on June 20th. His passing triggered immediate tension among his sons. The emperor died on an island in the Rhine River, symbolically positioned between the territories that would soon be contested by his heirs. His final moments were spent attempting to ensure a peaceful transition, though his efforts would ultimately prove futile. Lothair's bid for supreme authority began almost immediately after his father's death. As the eldest son and co-emperor, he believed firmly in his right to maintain imperial unity under his leadership. He quickly moved to secure key strategic positions, occupying Aachen, the imperial capital, and seizing the imperial treasury. Lothair attempted to enforce his authority by issuing commands to local officials throughout the empire and demanding oaths of loyalty from regional nobles. The formation of the alliance between Louis the German and Charles the Bald emerged as a crucial counterbalance to Lothair's ambitions. This partnership, formalized through the Strasbourg Oaths in 842, represented more than a mere military alliance. The brothers publicly swore their oaths in both Proto-French and Proto-German, demonstrating sensitivity to the growing linguistic divisions within the empire and their commitment to mutual support against their elder brother. The Battle of Fontenoy in 841 stands as the bloodiest confrontation of the Civil War. On June 25th, near the village of Fontenoy-en-Puisaye, the armies of Charles and Louis engaged Lothair's forces in a devastating clash. The battle began at dawn with cavalry charges and continued throughout the day. Contemporary chronicles describe the field strewn with thousands of dead warriors, many from noble families. The massive casualties would have long-lasting implications for the Frankish military aristocracy. The negotiations leading to the treaty involved complex diplomatic maneuvering. Initial talks began in 842, following Lothair's military defeat. The brothers met multiple times, often in the presence of noble mediators and church officials. The negotiations focused on achieving an equitable division of territory while preserving the essential unity of the Christian realm. Special attention was paid to ensuring each brother received lands with comparable resources and strategic value. The final treaty negotiations took place in the city of Verdun in 843. The brothers and their representatives spent weeks debating territorial boundaries, rights, and responsibilities. The agreement they reached divided the empire into 3 kingdoms. Charles received the western territories, West Francia, Louis the eastern lands, East Francia, and Lothair a middle kingdom stretching from the North Sea to Italy, along with the imperial title. Several factors influenced the final settlement. Geographic features like rivers and mountain ranges helped determine boundaries. The distribution of linguistic and cultural groups played a role, as did the location of important religious centers and trade routes. The negotiators also considered the preferences of local nobles, whose support was crucial for effective governance. The implementation of the treaty required careful attention to practical matters. New administrative systems needed to be established, coins minted, and local officials appointed. The brothers had to manage the transition while maintaining stability and preventing opportunistic nobles from exploiting the situation. Post-treaty developments revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of the agreement. While it successfully ended the immediate civil war, the division created new challenges. The Middle Kingdom, lacking natural boundaries and spanning diverse regions, proved particularly difficult to govern effectively. This would have significant implications for future European territorial divisions. The treaty's aftermath saw the gradual emergence of distinct political entities. The western portion under Charles would eventually evolve into France, while Louis's eastern territory formed the basis of medieval Germany. Lothair's Middle Kingdom, lacking geographic cohesion, would fragment further in subsequent generations. Legacy artifacts from this period include contemporary chronicles describing the events, diplomatic correspondence between the brothers, and administrative documents detailing the division of territories. Archaeological evidence, including coins minted by each brother and fortifications built during the conflict, provides additional insights into this transformative period. The Treaty of Verdun thus stands as a watershed moment in European history, marking both the end of Charlemagne's unified empire and the beginning of a new political order that would shape medieval Europe for centuries to come. The cultural and intellectual landscape of the mid-9th century remained deeply influenced by the Carolingian Renaissance, even as the empire approached its division. This period witnessed the continued flowering of learning, artistic achievement, and intellectual debate. The Carolingian Renaissance maintained its powerful influence on medieval culture. Palace schools, established during Charlemagne's reign, continued to educate noble youth and future church leaders. These institutions preserved classical learning while adapting it to Christian purposes. The curriculum followed the traditional liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. Latin served as the administrative and intellectual lingua franca throughout the empire. Official documents, legal codes, and diplomatic correspondence were composed in a standardized form of Latin, facilitating communication across linguistic boundaries. Court scholars worked to maintain classical Latin standards, even as vernacular languages gained prominence in daily life. The administrative use of Latin created a sophisticated bureaucratic vocabulary that would influence the development of medieval government. Monastic scriptoria played a crucial role in preserving ancient knowledge. Monks laboriously copied manuscripts, saving countless classical and early Christian texts from destruction. The period saw the development of specialized techniques for manuscript production, including innovative methods of page layout and text organization. Illuminated manuscripts from this era showcase exceptional artistic sophistication, combining classical motifs with Christian symbolism. The development of Carolingian minuscule script represented a major cultural achievement. This clear, standardized writing system, developed under Charlemagne and refined during subsequent decades, greatly improved the legibility and reproduction of texts. Its influence can be seen in modern lowercase letters. The script's efficiency and clarity facilitated the copying and dissemination of knowledge throughout medieval Europe. Intellectual debates concerning imperial power intensified during this period. Scholars and theologians grappled with questions about the nature and limits of imperial authority. These discussions drew on both biblical precedents and Roman political theory. The concept of translatio imperii, the transfer of imperial authority from Rome to the Franks, received particular attention as the empire faced division. Artistic expression flourished in various forms. Architecture combined Roman traditions with innovative features, as seen in the construction of churches and palaces. Ivory carving reached new heights of sophistication, producing intricate pieces that merged classical and Christian themes. Metalwork, particularly in religious objects, demonstrated exceptional craftsmanship. Musical development continued with the refinement of Gregorian chant and the evolution of musical notation. Monasteries served as centers for musical innovation, with monks developing new methods for recording and teaching sacred music. The period saw advances in musical theory and composition that would influence Western music for centuries. Educational practices reflected the period's intellectual sophistication. Teachers employed dialectical methods, encouraging scholarly debate and logical analysis. Students studied ancient authors alongside Christian texts, learning to reconcile classical wisdom with religious doctrine. The educational system produced scholars capable of sophisticated literary and philosophical work. The role of women in intellectual life deserves special mention. Noble women often received education in monastery schools, and some became important patrons of learning and the arts. Certain abbesses managed significant scholarly communities, contributing to the preservation and transmission of knowledge. Libraries grew in size and importance during this period. Monastery collections expanded through systematic copying efforts and book exchanges between institutions. Library catalogs from the era reveal impressive collections of religious texts, classical works, and contemporary writings. The organization and preservation of these libraries reflected sophisticated information management practices. Technological advances continued in various fields. Innovations in agriculture, including improved plowing methods and water management, increased productivity. Architectural knowledge advanced through the construction of increasingly sophisticated buildings. Metalworking techniques developed, particularly in weapons production and decorative arts. Literary production remained vigorous, with authors creating new works while preserving older texts. Historical writing flourished, producing detailed accounts of contemporary events. Poetry, both religious and secular, continued to develop, often showing sophisticated use of classical forms and metaphors. The period witnessed ongoing philosophical debates about the nature of reality and knowledge. Scholars engaged with questions of free will, divine providence, and the relationship between faith and reason. These discussions drew on both classical philosophy and Christian theology, creating sophisticated intellectual syntheses. The cultural and intellectual achievements of this era would have lasting influence on medieval Europe. Despite the political division of the empire, the shared cultural heritage fostered by the Carolingian Renaissance would continue to shape European civilization for centuries to come. The period's emphasis on learning, artistic excellence, and intellectual rigor established standards that would influence subsequent generations of scholars and artists. The Carolingian Empire's fragmentation occurred against a backdrop of significant external pressures and interactions that shaped its political destiny. These external forces played a crucial role in how the empire ultimately divided and evolved. Viking raids intensified dramatically during this period, with Norse warriors exploiting the political instability to launch increasingly bold attacks along the northern coasts and rivers. Their longships penetrated deep into Frankish territory, using major waterways like the Seine, Loire, and Rhine. These raids severely strained the empire's defensive capabilities and highlighted the challenges of maintaining a unified response to external threats. Coastal communities suffered particularly heavy devastation, leading to the construction of new fortifications and the reorganization of local defenses. Muslim forces continued to exert pressure along the southern frontiers, especially in the Iberian Peninsula and Mediterranean coastline. Their naval power challenged Frankish control of maritime trade routes, while periodic raids tested the empire's southern defenses. The threat of Muslim expansion influenced how territories were divided, as each successor kingdom needed sufficient resources to maintain effective border defense. The strategic importance of controlling Alpine passes and Mediterranean ports factored significantly into the territorial negotiations. Relations with the Byzantine Empire remained complex and multifaceted during this period. Constantinople viewed the Carolingian succession crisis with great interest, recognizing its potential impact on the balance of power in Europe. Byzantine diplomats maintained active communication with all three brothers during the conflict, carefully avoiding complete alignment with any single faction. Cultural exchange continued through diplomatic missions, trade contacts, and religious discussions, even as political relations remained delicate. Trade patterns underwent significant transformation as traditional routes adapted to new political realities. Merchants had to navigate increasingly complex political boundaries and varying regulatory systems. The great trading cities of the empire, particularly those along major rivers and coastal areas, faced uncertainty as new borders threatened to disrupt established commercial networks. The need to preserve vital trade routes influenced how territories were ultimately divided, with special consideration given to maintaining economic viability for each new kingdom. Italian politics played a particular role in shaping events, as control over Rome and the papacy remained a crucial aspect of imperial authority. The Pope's position as a spiritual leader and political actor added another layer of complexity to negotiations. Italian cities maintained their own commercial and diplomatic networks, which needed to be considered in any territorial settlement. Central European peoples, particularly various Slavic groups along the eastern frontiers, watched the empire's division with keen interest. Their relationships with different Frankish rulers influenced patterns of alliance and conflict along the eastern borders. The emerging political structure had to account for these established relationships and power dynamics. The division of the empire also affected relationships with other peripheral kingdoms and peoples, from the Anglo-Saxons in Britain to the various Spanish kingdoms. Each of these powers had to adjust their diplomatic and commercial relationships to account for the new political reality of three Frankish kingdoms instead of one unified empire. These external pressures and interactions profoundly influenced how the Treaty of Verdun was negotiated and implemented. The need to maintain effective defense against various threats while preserving crucial diplomatic and commercial relationships shaped the final territorial arrangements. The treaty's provisions reflected not just internal family politics, but the complex reality of the empire's position within the broader medieval world. The Treaty of Verdun's legacy extends far beyond its immediate historical context, profoundly shaping European political geography and cultural development for centuries to come. This pivotal agreement left an indelible mark on European civilization, whose effects resonate even in modern times. The emergence of France and Germany as distinct political entities stands as perhaps the treaty's most significant legacy. The division between West Francia and East Francia established fundamental geographic and cultural boundaries that would evolve into these modern nation-states. The Western Kingdom under Charles the Bald gradually developed into France, while Louis the German's eastern territories formed the foundation of medieval Germany. These divisions initiated distinct linguistic, cultural, and political trajectories that would define European history. The treaty marked the definitive end of Charlemagne's vision of a universal Christian empire. This dissolution of imperial unity forced medieval Europe to develop new models of political organization and legitimacy. The ideal of a single, unified Christian realm under one ruler gave way to a more complex political landscape characterized by competing kingdoms and emerging national identities. This transformation fundamentally altered how medieval Europeans understood political authority and territorial sovereignty. The development of distinct national identities accelerated following the treaty. Each region began to develop its own unique cultural, linguistic, and political characteristics. The French language evolved differently west of the Rhine, while German dialects consolidated in the east. These linguistic divisions reinforced emerging cultural boundaries and contributed to the formation of distinct national consciousness in different regions. The treaty's influence on modern European borders proves remarkably enduring. The general outline of the division between France and Germany remained surprisingly stable through centuries of European history. The Middle Kingdom's territory, though eventually fragmented, created a belt of smaller states between France and Germany that influenced European politics well into the modern era. Countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, and Switzerland partly owe their existence to this initial division. Modern territorial disputes often echo themes from the Treaty of Verdun. The challenge of dividing territory while respecting linguistic, cultural, and economic realities remains relevant in contemporary international relations. The treaty provides valuable insights into how complex territorial settlements can be negotiated and implemented, even in situations of intense conflict. Questions of succession and power transfer continue to resonate in modern contexts. While hereditary monarchies are now rare, the principles of peaceful power transition and equitable division of resources remain crucial in political settlements worldwide. The treaty demonstrates how family dynamics can interact with broader political considerations in succession disputes. The treaty's emphasis on diplomatic solutions offers lessons for modern conflict resolution. The eventual settlement required complex negotiations, consideration of multiple stakeholders' interests, and careful attention to practical implementation details. These aspects of diplomatic practice remain relevant in contemporary international relations. The role of mediators in achieving political settlements finds clear parallels in modern diplomacy. The treaty negotiations benefited from the involvement of neutral parties, particularly religious leaders who could bridge divides between competing factions. This demonstrates the enduring importance of trusted intermediaries in conflict resolution. Economic considerations in territorial division remain relevant today. The treaty's attempts to ensure each kingdom's economic viability by allocating resources and trade routes fairly parallel modern concerns about economic sustainability in political settlements. The treaty's impact on cultural development offers insights into how political boundaries influence cultural evolution. The gradual divergence of French and German cultures following the division demonstrates how political borders can accelerate cultural differentiation over time. The management of shared resources and responsibilities after political division remains a contemporary challenge. The treaty's provisions for maintaining connections between the divided kingdoms while respecting new boundaries parallel modern issues of cross-border cooperation and resource sharing. The role of symbolism and legitimacy in political settlements finds expression in how the treaty handled the imperial title and religious authority. These considerations about symbolic power and legitimacy continue to influence modern political agreements. Constitutional development in Europe was influenced by the treaty's example of negotiated political settlement. The idea that political authority could be divided through peaceful agreement rather than solely through force set important precedents for later constitutional arrangements. If this exploration of how medieval divisions shaped modern Europe has captured your interest, remember to subscribe to the Medieval Archives channel and activate notifications to join us in uncovering more fascinating stories about the decisions that shaped medieval Europe.